My story begins differently than most. For most of my life, I didn't know but a few details of the first 6 months of my life. That's because I was adopted when I was 6 months old. So basically, as far back as I can remember, I have known I was adopted. My parents openly shared my adoption details after taking the advice of two nuns that brought me to their home. Still, life could be a little confusing as an adoptee. I noticed early on that I didn't really look like my parents, brother, or cousins. Even though I knew the word adopted, what did that really mean? My adoptive parents, Chuck and Dottie Ball, were married in Bedford, Indiana at the Bedford Free Methodist Church in June of '62. My mom grew up in Bedford and moved to Indianapolis after graduating from Greenville College. She met my dad, a lifetime Indianapolis resident, at a church revival meeting where they both were in different gospel singing quartets. When my parents decided to adopt, they had this photo made to give to the adoption agency. This is me at 6 months, right after my adoption. Some of the pictures from my baby book that my mom always joked were taken right before I would start crying. These are some of my favorite photos growing up, especially the one of my new baby brother. We adopted David in 1969 when he was only 6 weeks old, so there is about 3 years between us. Many of my fondest memories are of family. My mom sewed a lot of special outfits for us growing up. We were always active in our church and I participated in our Christian Life Club, earning badges. I dreamed of cars and dogs. Living in Speedway, Indiana, you never forget the Indianapolis 500. I love listening to the race cars and all the excitement in May. I think every kid growing up near the Speedway dreamed of driving a fast car. My other dreams always included pets. If not for all of my allergies, I probably would have pursued veterinary school. I've always loved dogs and wanted to live out in the country with many animals. Many people ask me about being adopted. I always tell them I think of my brother the same way anyone would a biological sibling. This is true of my parents too. My parents will always be my mom and dad. Finally, I reached my first educational goal, graduating near the top of my class in 1985 at George Washington High School. Kentucky has a special place in my heart. Daryl and I got engaged on Halloween night in 1987 while visiting the Randall family farm that has been in the family for more than 100 years. It was a very exciting day, starting with exploring the beautiful Pulaski County countryside and a local cave that normally would have been underwater. I married Daryl, my best friend and love of my life, in May of '88 at our home church in Indianapolis, Indiana. We met when I was in 6th grade and he in 8th. We started out as good friends and were on the same Free Methodist Bible quizzing team. We didn't date though until after I completed high school. Having lived in the Indianapolis area all my life, I never dreamed or imagined leaving the state. But Daryl and I were about to begin a whole new chapter in our lives as we moved to New York. May of 1988 was full of life-changing events. Daryl graduated from Purdue University one weekend, we married the next weekend, vacationed in Kentucky the following weekend, and then finally moved to a small town outside of Rochester, New York, called Ogden, New York. After a short time, I decided to pursue a business degree. I received my associates from Monroe Community College in May of 1991. Then I continued at Rochester Institute of Technology, earning my Bachelor of Science in Business Administration as an accounting major in August of 1993. I started to ask myself questions again. Where do I belong? What defines me? Is it my educational interests and degrees, environmental interests, family, religion, career, friends, motherhood, sports interests, or even political affiliations? I had to make a decision. So less than a year after my graduation, we returned to our home state of Indiana. Again, I got to a point where I was asking myself many more questions. What are my plans for my life? About that time, I got the best news of my life. I was expecting a baby. This was truly a blessing for us. We were happily married, but we were excited to wait for the birth of our first child. Josh was born in December of 1997, and amazingly, we had another child, Jason, almost 2 years later in 1999. birth of my two sons brought my attention back to looking for my birth mom. I renewed my search and was able to find her on my own in 2000 after a determined search using the Indianapolis White Pages. My only clues were my original birth name, my birthday, and I knew she was only 17 when I was born. Pictured here are my birth mom with my youngest son Jason at our first meeting. My parents were also there to support me and show their thankfulness to her. In the background is her family home in London, Kentucky, where she grew up before coming to Indianapolis with her family. Finding my birth mom didn't answer all my questions, so with enough information to start my search at Butler University's library, I followed the clues to uncover information about my birth father. Sadly, he had died long before in a car accident in 1971, but I continued my search for his family and was rewarded with more additions to my growing extended family. Growing up, I felt a closeness to my adopted family and their extended family, but I always wanted to know more about my own personal roots. I finally had all the pieces of my life puzzle. I have been very blessed to have a relationship with all my extended families, and especially am thankful for my time with my biological grandmother. Before she died, I found